What is going on, guys? This is the Vaulted Podcast, your number one source for cards, collectibles, and the community. I'm Dot Shivam, your one and only host, and I'm joined by our special guest for this evening, AestheticChimp. Yes, it is a Thursday. Yes, we didn't have a podcast last week, mostly because I was in California having a boys trip slash Collecticon. So, I appreciate you coming on to the podcast at such a last minute notice, but with everything that's currently going on, I really wanted to get your level of expertise recorded on a video-based format. But before we get started, guys, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you're listening to us through Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure you leave a 5-star review. Every bit is appreciated. And again, thank you guys for joining us this evening. There's a lot of interesting stuff happening this week. But before we get right into it, we want to know who you are. AestheticChimp Cole. You can go by Cole. AestheticChimp, whichever one is totally fine if you're referring to him. But tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got involved with the Pokemon community, and what led you to take on this sort of avenue of becoming this sort of analyst behind signatures and price points and all that jazz. What drew you to signatures? So before we get to that aspect, let's go ahead and start by how you got into Pokemon and how you got to that point to here.
Yeah, so I started collecting a long time ago. My sister was really big into Pokemon. She's older than me. And she gave me her collection when she kind of grew out of Pokemon, and then I got to keep everything. And back in 2016 with Pokemon Go and Evolutions coming out, I kind of got back into things. I was like, because they reprinted a lot of cards, so it was kind of nostalgic for me to see the stuff that I used to have in my old binders.
Absolutely.
And I went on a deployment in late 2019, early 2020. And then as I was coming back, Pokemon had really blown up. And when that happened, I reached out to my parents and I was like, hey, do we still have those binders by chance? And they went down to the basement. They ended up finding them. So we ended up with Jungle, Fossil, and base set, all complete sets.
Dude, you're lucky, man. I did the same thing post-college, and there was literally nothing in my basement. They had all my little sister stuff. They had all my little sister stuff, but nothing on mine.
Well, I guess maybe it's because I was the favorite child. Who knows? But so we graded all of them, and the lowest grade we got anything was an 8.5 with CGC. It was just very, very strong cards, and that basically became the foundation of my personal collection and kind of the seed money into getting into some higher end cards. And I very quickly, because I went through the same process that I think a lot of collectors do, where you start out with whatever sets are nostalgic to you, and then you expand onto more exciting sets, and then you kind of realize if you're not satisfied there, that you want to go to something more exclusive or more rare. And so for me, that transition was into Gold Star cards. I loved a lot of the Gold Stars. And so I made it my personal goal to collect a lot of them. I wanted to collect all of them. And I got about 85% of the way there. And then I realized I actually don't really care about the remaining 6 cards that I need. And so I kept a few of my favorites, sold off the rest of them. And then the next echelon for me was I wanted to get into trophies. And so I started looking at some prize cards, like the Grand Party, which is one of my favorite cards of all time. And while I was looking that up, I came across Scott Pratt has a signed Grand Party on eBay for for $100,000. And I was like, oh, that's exciting. This looks really cool. It's my favorite card. I love Sugimori artworks. And I just really started taking a deep dive into autographs. And I made a ton of mistakes right in the beginning because there's almost no information out there about autographs. And it's basically there are 2 E4 forum threads, one talking about Sugimori autographs exclusively, and then one talking about just autographs in general. And other than that, it was I could find one YouTube video here or there, but there was almost no information out there. So I bought some fake autographs. I bought some authenticated ones. I got lucky on some raw ones that ended up being real. And, as I went through that process, I realized that there's just such a lack of information out there. Absolutely. And so in order to help mitigate the issues that I had to go through for other people, I started trying to track as much information as I could and then get that out for free to everybody so that they had that accessible to them so that people can make that step as well. Because there's a really big like knowledge gap in autographs in Pokemon. Because with sports, it's like it makes sense. Like a LeBron signed card, you know who signed it. But like
Yeah.
you look at a Charizard, you may not inherently know who would be the person signing it. So I wanted to make it as easy as possible and as accessible as possible for people to access that information to bring more people into that little niche within the hobby.
Yeah, no, I think what you're doing is actually pretty awesome, to be completely honest with you. And the reason why is because with myself specifically, I had my Arita signature, but I sold it this weekend. But with that kind of stuff, it's as a collector that's been around for, not that long. I'd say I've only been around for the last 3.5 years, which isn't long in the grand scheme of things as far as the hobby goes. Me knowing like my area of expertise, I don't know too much about autographs. I don't know too much about signatures to begin with, and I don't know the frequency at which certain artists do their signings. Like I know that Arita's very very he's more apparent within this space versus like other people like Fukuda or other people. And so for me, it was one of those things where it's like, how do I like price this out? Like, how do you even evaluate a signature? Do you value it based on the way it looks? Like, how do you even grade a signature? Like, these are all things that kind of for me was just it just went over my head. And so like when I followed you, after our initial talks of like me splitting up with my previous partner. I started looking at your stories more and more often. I was like, wow, this guy's actually really well versed as far as signatures go. And for me, it's like, it's this whole new avenue of things for me to really learn about, and seeing how you even have a lot of this data kind of compiled on your story, and how you break down certain things was pretty, to be completely honest, pretty fucking awesome, because no one else was doing that, like. And the vast majority of the people that are in the hobby that have been around for so long that are all about autos and all about signatures, they kind of just kept that information to themselves. And so like it was this thing that became kind of difficult to kind of access. It was just like if you weren't like this person who has been around in the hobby for the last 6 years, that kind of or more, that kind of information was very, very hard. It was kind of like hidden and kept away from the vast majority of the community. So like that was something that kind of, you being a part of this community, you offer something so massive to the community that I think the vast majority of people, even the people who listen to this podcast, should even follow you, because you're a wealth of knowledge as far as that goes.
I appreciate the kind words very much.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting niche within the hobby that I think is very daunting when you start looking at all the different options, and there's so many different rabbit holes we can go down and discuss on specifics of things. And I didn't like how complicated it was and how little information there was. And
Absolutely.
yeah, you were talking about how a lot of people kind of hold that information in. That's There's been an interesting amount of kind of pushback on me bringing light to some of this information.
Really?
Because I think a lot of collectors who have been collecting autographs for a longer period of time take advantage of the fact that there's not much information to make more money. And I don't blame them. Like, it's a business decision, absolutely. Like, if you can sell things for twice as much as they're worth because there's nowhere to compare it to, fair enough. Like, good on you. But that's not how I choose to do things. And so I've had to deal with a little bit of pushback on things because people don't like being so transparent. But I think we've seen Catch 'em All and TCA, when Rusty bought one of the trophy cards from Ketchum, he posted like all of the transparency information. So like what he bought the card for, what his asking price was, what his offers were, what was at like bottom floor was, all that kind of stuff. And when I saw that, I was like, man, this is exactly what we need, because these are such complicated things, such expensive cards. So we don't have, like, you can't comp this stuff out on eBay. So if nobody's going through and making that information public, it's just going to be completely lost on the majority of collectors.
And I think as collectors, I think we owe it to each other to kind of be transparent in that aspect, right? Like I know myself when it comes to any of the toys that I have, as far as high-end toys that I have or anything that I'm buying as far as collectibles go, I'm very, very transparent as far as what I bought them for and what kind of offers I've received, right? Like I think it's only I think it's a responsibility as a collector to kind of do your due diligence in that kind of regard. And you saying that, like, I think you're referring to Dan Catch 'em All Collectibles.
Yep.
Dan is very thorough about a lot of his stuff. I know that him on his podcast with Old School Pokemon, Pokeflip, shout out to them. They're very, very thorough. They're very, very informative as far as what they do and how transparent they are. There is a very, very small minority of people that kind of do keep that kind of stuff hidden away. And you're right. It's mostly to profiteer off of that. And there's nothing wrong with making a profit, but eventually I don't think it's okay to be upset that you're kind of disclosing or you're informing people or exposing people to this side of the hobby in terms of numbers and numerical values, or just showing people the raw data itself. Because as this hobby grows, there's going to be more and more people who are going to give out that sort of information, like it's not going to be hidden forever. You know what I mean? There's a lot of things about this hobby that are still like kind of hidden away that we don't necessarily know about, whether it's, plushies, whether it's toys, whether it's cards, whether it's video games or whatever. There's always like new information coming out every single day. And so like in that regard, I think what you're doing is actual justice for the community. I think you're actually helping people out, and you might not see or reap the benefits right now, but eventually you will. Like it's one of those things where when you're constantly putting out this level of information, people are always going to go back to. Steve Jackson in the chat says, I wish there was more access to some of the artist signings. Shame that most of the artists don't offer any send-in options for appearances. That just has to do with the culture. Most people in Japan, most if not all illustrators from Japan, don't like the aspect that anytime people do get signatures or they get sketches or anything of the sort, they don't like the aspect of the resale side of this particular hobby. That's why you don't see it happen too often. And there's this sort of thing with like Japanese nationalism where it kind of plays a role with Americans. Like most Japanese people really don't like Americans to begin with. Some do, but it's more of this thing where if they're going to make something in terms of profit, they're going to make as much money as possible without putting it back into like the States, for example. So like, that's why you see such a huge difference between Japanese print cards versus, American printed cards. Like there's such a big discrepancy. That's why you see like, it's the same thing with Bandai. Like Bandai in Japan is a lot larger. The presence behind everything is a lot larger versus here in the States, they just don't really care. That's why you see so many dead TCGs. But, Kinamori in the chat also says Koiki Saito will, I probably butchered his name, will be doing his signatures next month in Baltimore. Are you excited about that? Are you going to be going to Baltimore? I know Baltimore is just a couple of states above us. I'm sure you're going up there, right?
100%. Yeah, I'm nervous for how it's actually going to work out, because at Worlds it was like a random lottery. Like you rolled dice. If you got a necessary score, you were allowed in to sign. And at that signing specifically, they didn't allow like cards to be signed, although Saito will be signing cards. It's always nerve-wracking because we don't ever get all the information until like right before the event. But I will be going. I know Charlie Herlocker is also going to be putting on like a really nice dinner with a lot of autograph collectors. So I'm like, the signing is going to be exciting, but just being around so many autograph collectors, I think it's going to be really cool.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm like heavily considering it just to go. Like I don't have any Saito cards with me. I think it's kind of last minute because I was thinking that it was gonna be next year in September, but no, it's literally like a month after Worlds, which is absolutely crazy. Like pretty much right after Worlds, things are back in full swing as far as competitive play goes, which is crazy in my eyes, but I guess that's how things work. Taplab in the chat says people like to keep the appearances low key of illustrators so that they can get more cards signed and have less supply of signature cards. So like, do you feel like there's a lot of people who previously got a lot of stuff signed and then they're just slowly pushing a lot of these signatures out there? Like how do you go about authenticating signatures of artists or illustrators that don't really do signings here? And I know that there's some people who have had certain signatures of certain cards done that are legitimate, but because there's not really anything to compare it to, how does PSA go about authenticating it? Like we've seen Nishida signatures pop up, right? We've seen Tanjiro Satoshi Tanjiri or Tanjiro, is it Satoshi signatures pop up by like people like Pokémafa, right? How does PSA go? Like, do you know anything about how PSA goes about authenticating like big signatures like that? People that we don't even know what they look like. Like, I don't even think we know what Nishida looks like.
So there are a few pictures of her online,
Yeah.
and that signing with her is one of my favorite like autograph stories,
Yeah.
because there's this like Nishida club. So like if you own a Nishida card, then you get sent these photos from the signing event, and they're not
Okay.
posted anywhere online. And one of my favorite pictures is of every single card she signed at the first private signing, because she was out in Japan.
That
Well,
makes
she lived out in
sense.
Japan, but she did a signing out there. She signed about a dozen and a half cards in total that first signing. And so that's the provenance right there. But I actually spoke with the primary autograph authenticator with PSA, and they already had examples of her autograph
Really?
from other things, because she also sells art and prints. So
Mm,
she's done like officially released prints. And my assumption would be that although there were no Pokemon cards signed by her, she'd signed other things that PSA had
yeah,
already authenticated, so
that
they were
makes
able to
sense.
kind of compare. When you're looking at some other people like truly one of one autographs, how PSA authenticates it, I would imagine is more so based on provenance, not even looking at the autograph. Like if you have, for example, like I got a card signed by Victor Larson, MetaZoo artist.
Hmm.
Um, right when MetaZoo first released, I messaged him on Instagram asking him to do it. I sent him the cards. He sent them back to me with like pictures of everything along the way. And then when I submitted them to PSA, I said, "Hey, I don't know if you guys have this autograph in your files, but here's the card. Here's all the proof that it was actually him signing it." And I think that helped with the authentication process before they even really had him in their database.
Grab True, aka Grant says, "Oh my freaking gosh, hi, it's Aesthetic Chimp." Yeah, we got Aesthetic Chimp in the chat and in the podcast. We finally got him here, uh, and it's going really well. The podcast is going really great. Thank you for providing that level of information. I'm probably gonna have to talk to you about that because I just got some Digimon illustration contest packs. And I'm really wanting there's a Agumon within the pack, and I know the actual illustrator, well, not know him, but I have a buddy of mine that did get stuff signed by that person. So I'm probably going to do the same thing that you did in terms of being able to properly authenticate that card and go about doing it that way, because I do want something like that. I think that's actually really, really, really cool. Maxwell Lee, shout out to Maxwell, doing really well. He says, doing work, boys, love it. But yeah, I know that you are going to Baltimore. Be safe. It's not a safe place. It's a very, very, very dangerous, city. What are you going to actually like what cards are you going to get graded by Saito?
I don't have any yet. I haven't figured it out yet, because
Oh
any
man.
any events that I go to, I don't really like selling cards after I get them signed myself. It makes me
Yeah.
feel weird,
No,
especially if it's
if
like
I got something like
$30
particularly
to
signed,
sign.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I got something
Um,
particularly signed, I would not sell it.
yeah. So I kind of got to figure it out. Not sure. I mean, you know, Crystal Zards would be cool. I mean, just the Poncho Pikachus are some of my favorite cards, and Saito did all of those. And so it's like
Yeah.
like it's almost impossible for me to pick a favorite. So I'm just
I
gonna have to see.
If I went, it would probably be a jumbo Crystal Zard, and then it would have to be the Mario and Luigi Pikachu's, and then I will keep it raw because I know Charles Martinet comes with Collecticon every now and then. So I'd save it and then have him sign on the actual card too, so you get that dual auto on there, which would be so sick.
Yeah, I was thinking of doing that because I saw somebody was selling one in Long Beach raw. I was like,
Oh,
the voice of Mario is right there. I'm gonna see Saito next month. Like, I almost pulled the trigger on it, but then I like circled back an hour later and the card was gone because somebody else probably had the same idea.
Ah, yeah. As soon, yeah. What are your thoughts behind Oh, so, a guy Elijah here asked a question. Do you have any information on different styles of signature on Fukuda signatures, like he did that, did one take more time to sign? Oh, okay, okay. It says right here, did one Fukuda signature take more time to sign versus other signatures that he might have? I don't know if that's how he's trying to ask the question.
Yeah, so he signed twice in the United States,
Mm-hmm.
2006 Worlds and then 2020 Dallas Regionals. Um, it's really easy to tell when those were signed because almost all the 2020 ones he wrote 2020 on. And then if he didn't, he signed in English the first day, but he actually doesn't know how to write or speak English. So his translator like wrote out his name for him and then like had it on a piece of paper. So he would be like, okay, and he would have to do that like for every English personalization and his own name because he didn't know how to write it in English.
That makes
And so
sense.
it was taking way too long. And he actually David Kim owns a Rayquaza Gold Star signed by him,
You're
where
talking about Brown Eyes Yellow Dragon.
the other David Kim, Pikazard.
Oh, Pikazard. Pikazard
Yeah.
collector. Okay.
We have too many David Kims in the hobby. We
Yeah,
gotta figure
yeah.
these out. Yeah. But so he messed up the autograph while he was doing it. So like when he was doing the A, he like scratched it out and then kept signing after that. So now it's like every time I look at that card, all I can see is like the massive like blotch of red because he messed up his own name.
That's still a cool story though. I like that. That's so sick. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's actually really really cool. That he just carried on. He just it didn't matter. It's just like, hey, it's a normal Pokemon card. Um, what are your thoughts on sketches? Like I know signatures are a big thing,
Mhm.
but I think sketches also play a big role as far as this whole process of getting autos done. So like, how often does that happen? Does that not happen anymore? Has it stopped? Um, do certain sketches by certain illustrators matter more than the other? Like, I feel like at this point now, with the rise of signatures and sketches, and how much we've seen a rise in terms of price points for a lot of these cards, it feels like the card itself doesn't necessarily matter. It just the signature itself matters at this point, and it in itself, it's become its own art. Um, Talk to us a little bit about that and like what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, so the sketch aspect is definitely really big. Especially when you're looking at illustrators like Arita or Fukuda who have signed like a ridiculous amount. Although Fukuda's only signed twice, he has the second most number of cards signed because he just like went ham for like 3 days, 8 hours a day straight, just like pumping them out.
That's impressive.
Um, but he doesn't sketch on everything. So most of the time when Arita went to events, it would be like 3 cards signed, 1 card sketched. So whenever there's a sketch, it's a little bit more exclusive. It's more personal. It took more time. So I know of one collector who was at Dallas Regionals and got 250 cards signed by Fukuda and got like 20 sketched cards.
Oh
So
my
it's a
god.
really low ratio. And as a result, like the price will dictate that. So when you're looking at stuff, there's going to be a price value increase for sketches. Um, as of now, it doesn't look like Pokemon is allowing anybody to do sketches on cards anymore.
Ooh.
Um, but it's probably like dependent on their specific manager and what information they get because Saito will be sketching on cards in Baltimore, but Arita wasn't sketching on cards at the last signing he was going to go to. So it's like a weird, it's kind of up in the air. Nobody really knows what's allowed and what's not allowed right now because the
Yeah.
Pokemon company's not going to give us that information. So we just kind of have to go based off of what we see. But in terms of value wise, there's a fairly significant increase. And I think for the most part, it's due to kind of the ratio of how many sketches there are. So like when you're looking at Arita autograph with a sketch is worth like roughly 10% more than without a sketch. Saito is about the same, like 10 to 12%. And then Fukuda signatures, it's almost 25% higher premium with a sketch than without. But then looking at other people like Sugimori, for example, it gets even more complicated because Sugimori almost always signed with the Pikachu sketch. Like it's just
Mm,
part of the signature now. So if you see a Sugimori sketch and you say, "Oh, it has a Pikachu sketch, cool, I should pay more for that." Well, no, not really, because that's just what his signature is. The first event that he did, where he ever signed, he signed with English cursive in this like really weird writing material that like looks goofy, with no sketches. And like those are super rare and super valuable. And then there are about a dozen cards that he signed with the sketch that wasn't Pikachu. And
mm.
those are the only sketches from him that are actually worth like more because of what was sketched on it. So it's not just as simple as saying, "Oh, there's a sketch, it's worth more." It kind of depends on the illustrator and how often they did that.
Right. Where does a lot of this evaluations where do a lot of these evaluations come from? Because like we see we see a lot of like we see Ken Sugimori, right? But like how does a person go about evaluating a signature? Does it just come down to the collector and what they're willing to buy? I mean, yeah, of course it comes down to what the person's willing to buy, but like how do you go about understanding and knowing whether or not something like whether or not you seeing a signature is overpriced or underpriced? Because there are auctions that are popping up more and more recently now, that essentially when you look at, you're like, hey, this one is worth this much, this one's worth this much. Like, how do you as an individual value what? How do you understand whether or not something's been overpriced or still something is underpriced? Like, what are your thoughts behind? Like, how do you go about doing that?
Yeah. So there's always going to be kind of that intangible, like somebody's just going to pay an astronomical amount for something. Like
Mm-hmm.
if Dubsy decides or Zhao decides he wants to buy something, like no matter what the price gets you, they're going to buy it because they like it.
Mm-hmm.
But generally speaking, in the beginning of like my analytic process with autographs began by going back to June of 2021 on PWCC's results and then Heritage and Golden,
Mm.
and tracking at this point for the past 5 months, all eBay sales for PSA and Beckett authenticated autographs.
Wow, you're
We
actually
track.
you're really comprehensive about this kind of stuff. Yeah,
I,
that's really
I
cool.
I wanted it to be as accurate as possible,
Yeah.
it sounds like a lot of time, but like there are a lot of Arita, Fukuda, and Saito sales, but like there aren't that many Sugimoris.
No, yeah.
There weren't enough. There are no Nishida public sales. There's never been a publicly sold card from her. And then like Himeno, there we've seen a few signed cards, but like almost everything's private sales data.
Fun
Um,
fact: Himeno also did illustrations for Digimon.
really,
Yeah,
has she signed any cards?
I don't think so.
That would be interesting to look at. Yeah. Um, she hasn't. Well, she hasn't signed since 2006 Worlds, and then like one really small signing in 2019. So she's nowhere to be seen right now, with no chance of coming back apparently. But um,
I would love to get a Lilymon signed by her. That'd be really sick.
you know what, you mentioned like just the fact that something is signed is like already almost all the value in a lot of this stuff, and I think that's absolutely true in most cases because just like any like especially if it's for your personal collection, like I really like when people go to signings and like I really like this artwork, I really like this card, and then they get it signed and it just holds like this massive sentimental value to people
Hmm.
that you don't get with like, oh, I have it in a PSA 10. Like the PSA 10 is almost just like a financial flex. Having a signed one is more of like a emotional flex.
Yeah, and it's
um
also this thing that like most Japanese illustrators aren't like. It's like we mentioned earlier in the podcast that they're not available all the time, and I don't think most of them like doing it. That's why you don't see them too often. I mean, like they could make a killing. They would make a killing if they would price all their signatures the same way that most people at Collecticon, like all the special celebrities, were like getting their stuff signed for. Like I know Sarah Natachuni's signature for like the most expensive thing is like $200, and it's like I it would amaze me to see how much money, like let's say Arita would make if he was doing 3 signings per each person at that kind of capacity. He'd make $600 off of just one individual. Like it would be insane.
yeah, the last information I saw from the last signing he went to, it was $20 a signature and
Yep.
45 with a sketch.
Yep. That
Like
was
it's
that was
it's
Ocala,
so
right?
low. I'm not sure. I don't
Yeah,
remember exactly what
I think
from,
it was
but
Ocala because he was supposed to do a signing in Jacksonville for Collective Con
yeah.
back in 2020, but that got canceled due to COVID. And then they tried to bring him back again, and that never happened, and so on and so forth. But no, that's actually really cool. But like, it's crazy to see how like you'll have like a $40 signature, and then it jumps up all of a sudden to $1,000. Like that to me just blows my mind.
Yeah, well, that sort of thing ends up making a lot of illustrators mad if when it happens at the event.
Mm-hmm.
I know that happened with Fukuda in 2020 and with Harada in 2019, where people would go get something signed and then
And then
just
sell
like
it.
just go sell it like at the same event, and it's very disingenuous for people to do that. And that sort of culture that we have here in America is part of why Japanese illustrators don't like signing for us as often as they might otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. It's a shame, but like at the same time, like every human being is opportunistic. So like knowing that, hey, I can spend like $400, $500 for a plane ticket. I can go to an event, spend other people's money because like I know some people will send their cards over to get their cards signed, and get that done, and then sell it for like $1,000, $2,000, so on and so forth. It's just
Yeah.
absolutely crazy. So like my next question is, do you feel like a lot of these signatures are overvalued? Do you think they're correctly valued, or do you think they're overvalued? Because like in my eyes, it still blows my mind how like you might have an MJ signature on a card, and that might not sell as much as, let's say, a I don't know, an Arita signature who has numerous amounts of signatures out there. Like I don't know, I'm just like kind of just asking questions just because I don't know too much about this particular side of the hobby, and I'm learning.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that's really difficult for us is we have no idea how many autographs there are for anybody except for Nishida.
Mm.
Nishida is the only illustrator that we actually know there are less than 50 of hers in existence. It's anywhere between 40 and 50 things that she's ever signed.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, we have no clue. Like we can try to get an idea for the proportions of things based on like how many sales and listings there are, which is something that we actually did. So like Arita, for example, when we did took this data, had 98 active listings and 33 sales in the past 60 days. And then Saito, Yoshida, Akabane, Fukuda, Sugimori, Himeno, and Nishida, all of them totaled less than what Arita had in sales and listings. Um, and that gives us an idea of how rare they are, but we don't
Mm-hmm.
actually know. Whereas like with sports cards, there is still going to be like we don't know how many they necessarily signed that are raw, but you can go into PSA and look up Michael Jordan autographs and it will tell you how many cards he's ever signed. We
Right.
don't currently have that option with PSA with
Nope.
Pokemon illustrators, and I've kind of like reached out to them and trying to push them in that direction so we get some of that information.
Yeah.
Um, but I think by default, there's kind of like a baseline value for all autographs, and then everything above that is going to be in the eyes of the actual value of the card that it's on, whether or not there's a sketch, if it's personalized, the grade, that sort of thing. And then there's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be like the intangible, like the Himeno record, $6,600 a few months ago, on a Chansey card. Um, I was sitting next to Brown Eyes while he was bidding on it, and I kept telling him, "Oh yeah, this is still a good price. This is still a good price." As he's bidding it up, Quachansey's bidding it up as well, and then another guy out in Australia who reached out to me the week before and was like, "Hey, is Himeno rare?" I was like, "Oh yeah, she's super rare. You should buy this card." And then all of it just turned into like this massive bidding war between three
Three
massive
people.
collectors,
Yeah, three
and
whales.
it turned into a record sale. And
Yeah.
so like you can't predict that. Like nobody has any idea that sort of thing is going to happen. Um, and so that was like we also saw like Yoshida had a $10,000 sale, well, just under $10,000 a few weeks ago on PWCC. And it was
Mm-hmm.
like, we just don't ever see that autograph. So nobody knows if it's overvalued or not because that's the first one that's ever been sold on PWCC.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of in this space right now where I think there are a lot of people making this a similar path to what I did, where they are transitioning into this more niche part of the hobby because it's more affordable than trophies,
Trophies.
but is still like really, really low pop stuff.
Right.
And so a lot of money is flooding into it, and we're going to see like some massive spikes here.
Yeah.
Like, we just had the first 5-digit public sale of that Sugimori signed Dark Charizard
Yeah.
last week on PWCC, and that was huge.
Yeah.
Like, that is fantastic for the autograph market. And
I mean, we're there's more Ken Sugimori stuff that's on Heritage that's currently on Heritage right now. Like we saw it at Collecticon.
yeah, it's interesting. I've actually Golden's the same way. Golden has had a decent amount of Sugimori stuff recently. I have purchased every single Sugimori autograph that Golden has ever sold. Um, there's been 3, but still,
That's a flex. That's a flex.
they go for, I feel like they go for low prices. So like when I like looking at all of the data, I'm selling and I'm seeing other people sell, like the bottom dollar for a Sugimori autograph is like $4,000 to $4,500.
Mm.
And when you add in like the rarity of something, like the desirability of a card, like I purchased the Alakazam, base Alakazam Pop 1 autograph on the Holo for 67.50. And it's like, you're gonna tell me that like this massive card, iconic card from the first ever set, signed by Sugimori in a Pop 1, is only like a couple $1,000s more, like than the same autograph on, like, literally I sold on a 10-cent card a Sugimori for $4,500, and then that card has since passed on to somebody else in a cash plus trade deal where the guy wanted it for almost 10,000. And so
That's
it's like that
insane, man.
valuation that he's saying, like, this is a really good deal at 6,700 was true, and because it just, people don't see it, nobody's looking up autographs, or they weren't a few months ago. Now we're starting to see more people coming in, so that's why we're seeing a bunch of really big spikes.
So we're gonna put a thumbtack on that.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Masuda signatures? What are your thoughts on that?
I don't have much of an opinion.
Mm.
It's difficult for me because I try to only look at things objectively and like based off of analytics, so that I'm not just giving out like a personal opinion, because
Okay.
realistically, I don't have any more information than anybody else does. Like,
Yeah,
all the
you're
information
very data driven. Okay.
yeah, I try to be, because then it's like, if people are arguing with my valuations and what I say about autographs, they're arguing with the data that I've collected, which
Correct.
there may be other ways to collect data that could be more accurate, but it's still at this point probably like the largest compilation of data. So if looking at it from an objective perspective, I probably have like the best estimating ability.
Yeah.
Yeah, but knowing that I don't have more knowledge than, I mean, Alec Pokemon, Jeremy Pokeswole, like, some of these guys have just wealths of knowledge that I don't have, because they've talked to, I mean, Alec flew out to Japan to meet with Saito a few months ago to like plan this event in Baltimore. Like,
Yeah.
I don't have those relationships. So
Yeah.
like, I try to stay out of like personal opinion stuff, because I just don't have the information to be able to form a proper opinion.
That's pretty cool. That's actually really interesting that you say that. To kind of go back to what you were saying before, we're gonna take the thumbtack out. Why do you see, like, what do you attribute the reason for this rise of interest behind signature cards all of a sudden? Because like we know for the longest time that a lot of this stuff is low pop, but why are we seeing a lot of this stuff hit actual auction houses now? And does that mean that this stuff is overpriced because of we're starting to see a lot of things hit the market all of a sudden? Or do you think things are correctly priced, and regardless of what these cards go for, let's say they do go over what they typically do, does that still make it a quote unquote good investment or a good buy? I mean, obviously, like, I know that myself, if I were to buy into any of these, if I do overspend, it's because I'm a collector. But like, I just want to know what your thoughts are on the matter as to why we're starting to see a lot of these really, really big signatures, a lot of this stuff to hit, you know, Heritage, PWCC, Golden. Like, why are we seeing all this stuff hit now?
Yeah, so I'm gonna address the overpriced concept first, and
Okay,
then jump back into the rest of it. So
absolutely.
I think overpricing is not possible on things that are this rare.
Okay,
So I'm gonna use the PSA 10 Illustrator for an example. Like people say it's not worth $5 million, but we have somebody who is willing to give that much value in trade plus cash to get it.
correct.
It's now worth that. He's not going to let it go for less than that, and it's the only one. Like who are you gonna, like how are you going to argue the price? You could say, oh well, a 9 sold for less than $1 million, but Zhao was willing to spend 1.3 million to buy that card,
Right,
and just nobody else was bidding on it. And it's something it's when it's this exclusive and this rare that you just kind of have to go with whatever people are willing to pay for. Like
right.
it's not like you could make that argument for like signed Charizards from base set, because there are across all of the base set prints and then evolutions, there's 250 signed Charizards.
Hmm.
And so you can look at like, okay, you paid too much for this version because I can look at 50 other comps over the past year to tell me that. But if you're looking at like a Pop 1 PSA 10 Auto 10 autograph, like it's whatever someone's willing to pay. And that's basically just like the entire foundation for it.
Hmm.
Um, so I don't think that you can really overpay for an autograph on a good card. Um, so that would be like something that's a more expensive card. Like I have a signed Gold Star Play Promo Jolteon. It's
That's
Pop
cool.
1,
That's
and
cool.
it's I have no idea how to price the damn thing because there's no sales. It's like I bought it, and I
Yeah.
bought it from the guy who got it signed. Like, I, how do you figure that out? Like, it just turns into whatever someone's willing to pay, and
No,
it's
yeah, I
very
get that.
difficult.
No,
There
I
seems to
totally get that.
be there seems to be like an exponential value in like the desirability and value of a card when it's signed. So like you look at baseline Sugimori sells for 4 to 5 thousand, and then when you get up into like a Watsy Hollow, um, so like my Alakazam, that Dark Charizard, you're looking at like the 10 to 15 thousand range, and then
Hmm.
you get to Grand Party, and that's Scott's turned down $40,000 for that card. He's asking 100 for it. Maybe he would let it go for 65, but like that's a huge spike. Even though the price difference in the cards is only at most $2,700.
Yeah.
If it's a PSA 10 Grand Party, like it's such a strange market that the conventions of like overpricing is almost like it's we have nothing to compare it to. So
Yeah.
that's part of the difficult part, and that's what it was difficult about the data as well. That like when I put some of this stuff out, people were kind of treating it like gospel, which is not what the intention was. Like
Okay,
people see like,
that's fair.
oh, like the average Arita sale is like $1,600 based on the data we have,
Right.
but I've bought literally dozens of Aritas within the past year for $500.
Yeah.
Um,
I sold one this weekend for 450.
exactly. But you see, there's a big inflation as well because so many signed Charizards are sold, and those are almost always like $2,000. So it
And
inflates the price up on average.
on top of that, I think like if you have a auto card and and it comes from an illustrator that has signed plenty, and then all of a sudden you see a lot of them hit the market, all of a sudden it kind of devalues it a little bit.
Yeah.
In that kind of regard. But one card that I would love to get signed by Ken Sugimori, it would probably be on the case, or if like I would actually get another card of this similar copy, would be this one right here. It's
Oh yeah.
the Cardis. Yeah, I would love to have him sign one of this, like either this or the starters card. Just because it's just, I don't know, to me like that kind of artwork is just iconic to me. But
Yeah,
no,
I would
I
really like to get some of the 95 Top Sun cards signed by
ooh,
him
so
because he did the
97.
entire set. Well,
97.
yeah.
Yeah.
They say 95 on the card, but printed in 97. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
don't get Max City upset in here.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying
No,
to get the ultimate stonks. That's what I need.
Ultimate Stocks. Yeah, yeah. No, I think I think in my eyes, I think that card right there is just pure it's just chef's kiss.
Yeah, it's
Um,
gorgeous.
yeah, I mean it's one of those things where for me, it's it's definitely an interesting part of the hobby. Elijah says, how about when artists date the cards? Do you think the older the signature, is there more value attributed to it, or what? Or do you think that's just purely a new layer of the signature in itself? Like, do you think that having an older signature from, like, let's say 1990 whatever versus now has any sort of effect to the actual price?
Yes, it has an effect on the price, and that is consistent with sports as well.
Mm.
Like buying a Mantle autograph from while he was a player versus a Mantle autograph from after he retired, there's going to be a massive value difference, and you can actually see differences in the autograph. And the
Hmm.
same thing happens with various different illustrators. So Alec, for example, is so good at Sugimori autographs that he can look at one and tell you specifically what event it was signed at, which is
Wow.
just he's so knowledgeable about Sugimori autographs. But like
Alex
a
is a good
really
guy. Alec is such
he's
a
a
good
good
guy.
guy. But an easier example would be like this Arita.
Hmm.
So it has this really long tail on the front. Um, that is indicative of like a very old signing. This is like an early 2000s autograph from him. And don't necessarily sell for more because there's so many Aritas. I personally value it a little bit higher. But I do know that cards that have been signed by Fukuda in 2006 that he dated um, are worth a little bit more
Okay,
because
that's fair.
of well, he also signed differently. So most of them were in gold ink, and he signed over the card artwork, and it was also a different signature style. But those typically sell higher than the things he signed in 2020. I think it just feels more historic that way for a lot of people.
Right.
And it's again, it's another one of those like non-tangible things that you can't really say, oh, well, it's a 5-year-old signature, so it's worth more than a 1-year-old signature. Like it's more of a personal preference thing.
Right.
But I know a lot of people do prefer getting things that are as old as possible that have been signed.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's pretty well put. I kind of want to shift over to Collecticon a little bit.
Yeah.
I know that a lot of these different conventions have a bunch of different special guests. Are you also going about, getting signatures from a lot of these special celebrities at these shows?
Not personally, no. So my interests lie in terms of personal collecting with getting signatures from friends and then getting signatures from illustrators.
Makes sense.
Um,
Yeah.
so like like at the national, I had my vendor pass signed by everybody
Yeah.
when we were at trade night because I that's it's like a nice like memorabilia memory piece, and I do the same thing in most collecticons. While carry around a slab and I have a bunch of people sign it
Yeah.
because that lasts a while. That's enjoyable, but
Mm-hmm.
there's I don't have a strong connection with like Sarah or the voice of most of these people from various different video games or the black uh, Power Ranger. Like it's cool to see those people, but I don't have like I don't value their card as much as I would value just like meeting them.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
That's fair.
and so like I go and I actually I had Jason Page on my Instagram page like for an interview a few months ago,
Yeah.
and then it was really nice when I met him in Charlotte. He like didn't recognize me at first because he sees so many people, but then I like mentioned that interview, and then he like all of a sudden remembered everything about it, and it turned
Yeah.
into this like really good friendship that like now whenever I go to these events, like he will sign stuff for me for like my sisters and that kind of stuff, and just do it for free because
Yeah.
we're just being friendly about it.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool having those sorts of relationships, and that's what I value more than like, oh, Jason, sign my stuff. I want to sell it.
Yeah.
Like it's just but a lot of the people at Collecticon just that's not the sort of autograph that I collect because I'm not nostalgic about those individuals.
Absolutely. Makes sense. I mean, I think everyone has their own preferences, and I mean,
Yeah.
I totally get it. I mean, I'd go crazy over. I think for me, I think that's sort of the same thing. Like I had just got my Beckett 9 first edition LOB Blue Eyes, and on my panel, this was back in Dallas. I had Eric Stewart on my panel, And towards the very, like, throughout the entire panel, it's my first time having him on my panel. He was doing like a bunch of different voices, and towards the very end, he did the Seto Kaiba voice where he says like, "You're a third-rate duelist with a fourth-rate deck." And like, I was just like, it brought me back to my childhood, and since that was such a huge moment for me, like such a memorable moment, I was like, you know what? I had Sarah Nadachini sign on my first edition Shadowless Charizard and it was like kind of like this thing that kind of sprung into this like beautiful friendship. And then having Eric sign on top of the actual card, like, you know, it's not even on the little box, it's like on the actual card. I love it for that very reason, because he's like, I don't know, that to me just meant a lot, because I don't see myself selling that card anytime soon.
Yeah.
And it was just like it was like a moment for me. It was such a memorable experience for me. So I totally agree with you on that.
But there were also like 3-hour long lines to get things signed in Long Beach. Like I'm probably in the minority of cases of like people who like don't really care about the signings at Collecticon, because it's just not for me. But like there were like, it was mind blowing how many people were waiting in line to get like their Funkos signed. It was,
dude, literally one end of the actual convention center to the other end of the convention center, you had lines on, like, literally the first day, which was absolutely crazy. Thoughts on, did you have an enjoyable experience at Collecticon?
Oh yeah, I love Collecticon. It's every event that I can go to, I do.
Yeah.
The only Collecticon I'm gonna miss this year is gonna be Kansas City, because I'm going to Baltimore instead.
Yeah.
Because they're the same weekend. But it's like,
Same.
even more so than like, one, it gets so many cards all in one place, so it's great. So I can, you know, I sell stuff as well, so I go buy collections, all that kind of stuff there. But then it's also like, I just finally get to meet people that I talk online with, and every convention I end up meeting new people who weren't able to make it to all the other ones. And it's really cool engaging with people face to face after like DMing for the past year. And it's very special.
I agree. I think Collecticon this year was this particular Collecticon was definitely different than Charlotte and Dallas, in the sense that there was a lot of stuff at this one. Like, there was video game stuff, there was a lot of like inbox stuff, some Magic the Gathering here and there. There was just way more, like, there was a lot more single packs, and I don't know. It just, like, to me, like, we know that like right now this market isn't too great. But like, going to these different conventions, like, you wouldn't think that. Like, you would think completely differently if you went to a Collecticon. And I think like what Collecticon is building out to be, and what it's going to become, I think it's gonna be pretty cool to see where it's at in the next 2 years. But I agree with you on that. I think it's like a cool space for me to like meet my friends. It's cool to see you. It's cool to see Grant. It's cool to see Tap Lab 100 aka 100 Charizards. It's cool to see like all these different people that I'm friends with on a regular basis. So, like, you feel like you go to a convention and you say goodbye and you're all sad for a little bit. It's like, but then you're like, oh wait, I'm gonna see you like in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Because like that's kind of how the frequency is with all these different events that kind of take place. Before we close it out, I kind of want to give you the opportunity to kind of plug yourself a little bit. Tell anyone that tell people what you're working on, or tell people to follow whatever. Take the time to be able to tell people about you and whatever you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at AestheticChimp. Over there, I don't post nearly as often these days because I'm not acquiring as many cards. I've got to this really lucky point where other than that signed Grand Party, I own every card that I want to have signed, which is like mind blowing to me. And I look and I was like, yeah, I don't feel like I'm missing any pieces here, which is great.
Cool.
But so what I've replaced that with, that I've started doing a little bit of like lifestyle stuff. Whenever we go to events, I always see like a big group picture of everybody. But we're putting out information about autographs. That's the big thing. We released like a how to price autographs guide back in a couple months ago at this point, like late May, and that talked through average sales data for primary illustrators, and then with sketches, with personalizations, how autograph grade and card grade impacted all of that, to kind of give people some of that foundational information. And then we put a little bit more, we talked about the scarcity between like Arita and everybody else. I'll put some information about that. And then actually one of my favorite things that we did with scarcity was looking at Arita versus Sugimori in base set. So I have it pulled up here, and Arita illustrated 19 cards in base set, and Sugimori illustrated 44. The autograph population for Arita cards in base set is 935. Sugimori is 49.
Oh,
So even though he illustrated less than half as many, there are 50 times as many autographs on his cards in the PSA population report than Sugimori.
wow.
And it's that, like, you want to, like, why you sell an Arita for $500 and the borderline for a Sugimori is 5,000.
Makes sense.
That starts, like, that type of information is why that is the case.
Yeah.
And we're going through compiling all this information in a longer form document. I'll be dropping a Medium blog and a couple blog posts over on the Dick and Jane's website, which is a store down in Jacksonville, Florida that I work very closely with. They're kind of supporting all of my research goals, giving me a lot more sales data and kind of hosting it all in one location. And so we're putting out information on how to authenticate your autographs, how to look at the provenance information on when illustrators have last signed and all their different signature styles, and basically just offloading all of the information that I've been able to compile by talking to all these individuals all into one like breathing document that'll be continuously updated. So that'll be releasing at least the like first form of that within the next month or so. And so that'll definitely be on my Instagram. That'll be on the website. And that's, I don't need to be like famous and get a bunch of followers. I want this information to be as accessible to everybody as possible. Because I have already seen a few people reach out to me that sell a lot of autographs who have acknowledged the impact that this information has had on their sales in terms of like the value they're getting being now closer to like some of the numbers that I put out, but then also just more things are selling and people are coming into autographs a little bit more. And so I like to think that part of the reason why we're seeing higher sales in a lot of things is due to some of the work that I'm doing.
Oh,
Obviously,
absolutely.
I'm not exclusively responsible for it, but it's
You're
nice
part of
to
it.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah, that feels really, really cool to me to be able to have that sort of impact in a positive way on the community. And so I'm just continuously working on doing that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know that, whoever watches this podcast and takes the time to listen to what you have to say, you are a wealth of knowledge. And I think people should follow AestheticChimp on Instagram and, keep an eye out for these Medium posts and, just keep an eye out. If you have any particular questions, DM the dude because dude definitely is knowledgeable. I know I'll be asking him different questions on how to get stuff authenticated with PSA as far as autos go, specifically this Digimon card I do want to get signed. I'll talk to you later about it, probably through DMs or just some after this. But on that note, guys, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch the Vaulted podcast. Cool stuff is always happening on here. We're keeping it pretty tame today, but I think I think you crushed it, man. Appreciate you coming onto the podcast, and you're more than welcome to come on the podcast in the future.
Well, thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. All right, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining the podcast. We'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.